G7 leaders leave Cornwall with pledges on COVID, climate and China. It was their first gathering for 2 years, and while the UK and EU's differences over the Northern Ireland continue, the Prime Minister says they didn't dominate.
The vast majority of the conversations that we've had over the last 3 or 4 days have been about other subjects, and there has been a fantastic degree of harmony.
On COVID, with a decision due tomorrow on England's lockdown, we'll be looking at the latest data in detail. Also tonight, the end of the Netanyahu era in Israel as a new government wins a vote of confidence in Parliament. A welcome for a president as the Queen hosts the Bidens at Windsor. And
sun's out, England are winning. What more can you want?
Just nice to be out with people, enjoying the weather, enjoying the football, and everybody just being able to enjoy themselves. It's great.
Good evening. The UK's hosting of the G7 summit ended today as leaders left Cornwall with a final statement that included COVID vaccine donations and more action on climate change. The Prime Minister denied that the summit had been dominated by rifts over post-Brexit arrangements in Northern Ireland, saying that that issue was a vanishingly small part of the meeting. He also said he would be putting out a whole package of information tomorrow about the next stage of lockdown easing in England. From St Ives, here's our political editor, Laura Koonsberg.
Ready for a fortifying early dip? Boris Johnson wanted to show off the British seaside to the most powerful leaders in the world, but has ended up going headlong into a clash on the side with the French president, who it's claimed questioned whether Northern Ireland was really part of the UK. The spectacle of the summit seemed immaculate. The more bracing reality, perhaps not so inviting.
And I know that the world was looking to us to reject some of the selfishness and nationalistic approaches that have marred the initial global response to the pandemic. I do hope that we have lived up to some of the most optimistic of hopes and predictions.
Were you offended by President Macron's comments in your meeting yesterday about Northern Ireland's place in the UK?
I think it's the job of the government of the United Kingdom to uphold the territorial integrity of the United Kingdom. I think it was a point I made to you yesterday, and actually that subject occupied a vestigial, vanishingly small proportion of our deliberations.
And you've listed what you believe to be the achievements of this summit, but health and environmental campaigners are really clear that they hoped it would go further. Do you wish you'd been able to push your fellow leaders to give even greater commitments?
$2.5 billion pledged for girls' education already. That's not half bad. And a new global campaign to help countries around the world to build back better, cleaner and greener. I think it's been a highly productive few days.
This global gathering is important for all sorts of reasons. It seems a good first connection between the Prime Minister and the American President. But the UK and the EU seem stuck again, pointing the finger at each other over Northern Ireland. Remember, as part of the Brexit deal, it still has to follow some EU rules. The Prime Minister's frustration, how tightly Brussels wants them enforced. European leaders angered, believing the UK is trying to slide out of what it agreed.
On ne peut pas, honnêtement, créer des polémiques chaque matin sur des sujets comme ceux-ci.
Honestly, we can't create disagreements every morning about these serious issues, said the French president. We just want the agreement to be respected. But the American president's 12-vehicle convoy rolled out of this tiny Cornish town. He wanted to leave behind a much bigger message, that after all the turbulence of Trump, he wants to work with the rest of the world.
I felt, it wasn't about me, but it was about America, I felt a genuine sense of enthusiasm that America was back at the table and fully engaged.
Big promises have been made on vaccines, on climate change, but there are blanks in the black and white over how those vows will be kept. And the Cornish air certainly hasn't blown away Brexit tensions. But overall, this summit has been a major statement of intent from the most powerful politicians in the West, that after a year of crisis, countries can do more together than working apart. However spectacular the surroundings, summits can't just be political love-ins. Prime ministers and presidents may have ambition in common, but ideas can clash. Postcard images don't make political problems disappear for good.
And we can join Laura live in Cornwall now. With the summit over, a big focus will be on that announcement on England's lockdown easing tomorrow, Laura. Has the decision already been made?
I think it pretty much has, Mishal, and there'll be a really sharp contrast, I think, tomorrow between the stunning backdrop of Cornwall, the blazing sunshine, Boris Johnson clearly relishing the role of playing host to the world's most powerful elected politicians, and the reality of what we expect he's going to announce tomorrow. A government source has told me in the last half hour that there has been a decision to delay the planned lifting of all of the COVID limits in England for another 4 weeks. I would stress that that has not been officially confirmed. It's not clear yet if there will be some exceptions, if there'll be some caveats attached. But for some days now, that's obviously been the direction of travel. You know, as COVID cases have started to creep up again, so too has the realisation in government that they were going to have to, in their view, take this kind of step. They will, of course, meet pockets of resistance and among their own party. There will, of course, be people, particularly in the hospitality trade or other forms of business, who really find the reality of what is likely to happen to be very upsetting, very difficult, very challenging. But it certainly seems that is where Boris Johnson's decision-making is heading. We'll know the precise details in the early evening tomorrow night. And a reminder, really, that whatever the global high politics, the glad-handing with other leaders from around the world, the reality of day-to-day difficult decision-making and dilemmas never stops for any Prime Minister or any President who's been here on the seaside this week.
Laura, thank you very much. Well, let's look then at the latest government figures on coronavirus. And in the last 24 hours, there were 8 more deaths and 7,490 new infections. It means the average number of new cases per day in the last week was 7,145. On vaccinations, just over 254,000 people received a first dose in the latest 24-hour period, which means over 41.5 million people, or nearly 79% of UK adults, have had their first jab. Just over 320,000 have just had a second jab, meaning that nearly 30 million, or 56% of adults, are fully vaccinated. Ahead of tomorrow's announcement, our health correspondent Jim Reid has been looking at the data in more detail and how the remaining restrictions in England could change.
Drinks and socialising outside this afternoon. Tomorrow, the government must decide whether to lift all remaining lockdown rules in England from June 21st, perhaps scrapping that limit of 6 people inside. The growth of the Delta variant, first found in India, has made that call more difficult. Scientists think it may spread 60% faster than the older Kent or Alpha version. Speaking on the Andrew Marr programme, a government advisor said relaxing rules further could fan the flames of the pandemic.
Well, the way I look at it is if we're driving down a road and you're coming up to a bend and you're not quite sure what's around that bend, but you think there might be something bad, you don't put your foot on the accelerator. If anything, you slow down, not speed up. And I think it's analogous to that. I think we've got to be really cautious.
COVID infections are still well below the levels seen in January, but they have been rising since some indoor mixing was allowed. This graph plots cases so you can more easily see the rate of growth. What scientists want to see is for that straight line to start curving round as transmission starts to slow down. If that doesn't happen, then at the current rate of growth, we could see 15,000 cases a day by the start of next week. The hope is the vaccine rollout can prevent those new cases turning into hospital admissions.
There are about half as many people in hospital now across the UK based on our infection rate than what you would expect. And the reason for that is that the older groups who were more likely to have gone into hospital have had both doses of the vaccine.
The data shows a second vaccine dose provides far more protection against the Delta variant than just one. Scientists say it's why a delay to that final stage of unlocking might be needed to give more time to get jabs into arms this summer. Jim Reid, BBC News.
After 12 years in power, Benjamin Netanyahu has been ousted as Israel's prime minister after a new coalition government won a vote of confidence in parliament. It will be led for 2 years by the right-wing nationalist Naftali Bennett, and as part of a power-sharing deal, he will then hand over to the centrist Yair Lapid for a further 2 years. Here's our Middle East correspondent, Tom Bateman.
They've waited for 12 years. In this divided country, for the people who wanted to oust their most enduring leader. Now it's their moment. It took a chaotic vote in Israel's parliament to get there. With the count about to start, Mr. Netanyahu makes one last stand. Iran is celebrating because they understand there will be a weak and slack government, he says. The opposition in Israel will have a clear and strong voice.
We'll be back soon.
The new coalition scrapes in by just a single vote. It was all over for Israel's combative, often controversial leader, one who leaves an indelible legacy. Benjamin Netanyahu rose rallying Israelis against the Oslo peace deals with the Palestinians.
There's a battle for Jerusalem.
He was a figurehead for the right. Supporters saw him as Mr. Security, but opponents despised his tough brand of nationalism. He won successive elections, but he split voters, and a trial for corruption, claims he denies, left him increasingly isolated. Israel's new PM is Mr. Netanyahu's former aide, Naftali Bennett, a nationalist who opposes a future Palestinian state. He called for unity, but laid into those he said were tearing the country apart. After 2 years, he'll hand over to the centrist Yair Lapid.
How long will the coalition last?
Israel's new coalition spans the left to the nationalist right, and for the first time, an Arab-Israeli party.
Naftali Bennett now has to lead the broadest coalition in Israeli history, and that could make it one of the most unstable. He has his work cut out just to govern.
They have a crisis to deal with after Israel's recent war with Hamas in Gaza and violent division inside Israel. Fears are rising of new tensions again. But this is a moment of Israeli history, as the throne is pulled away from the politician some called the King of Israel. Tom Bateman, BBC News, Jerusalem.
England have, for the first time, won an opening match in the European Football Championship. They defeated Croatia 1-0 at Wembley this afternoon, thanks to a second-half goal from Raheem Sterling. Our sports editor, Dan Rowan, is at Wembley now. Dan.
Well, on 9 previous occasions, England had tried and failed to win their opening match at Euros. On paper, this did not look easy. Croatia looked like the toughest opponents in their group, the World Cup finalists, no less. And, let's remember, on the hottest day of the year so far. But Gareth Southgate's men duly delivered. It may have only been a quarter full, but with a sun-drenched Wembley hosting England at a major tournament once again, for many of those lucky enough to be cleared to enter, memories of those iconic Euros 25 years ago were inevitable. Now a new generation would understand and hope. England had shown a united front in the build-up, the FA urging fans to respect the team's... The hosts agonisingly close. Another playing at his first major tournament, Calvin Phillips, also impressing in England's encouraging start. But the Leeds midfielder really in inches from doubling the lead.
And he couldn't keep the shot down.
Watching on, England's record goal scorer Wayne Rooney, no doubt impressed by a dominant performance. And he was about to witness a moment of history. 17-year-old substitute Jude Bellingham becoming the youngest player ever to appear at a European Championship.
Well, they settled early in the game. There were moments where the tempo dropped just because of the heat. The majority of the game we were in control, didn't give them many opportunities, and we looked dangerous.
I'm here with England, I'm enjoying my football, and that's the most important thing, and I'm just happy to score. I've always said if I played at Wembley at a major tournament, I'm scoring at Wembley, my back garden. I said I have to score, and it's great to finally do that.
Absolutely fantastic. Croatia come a bit more into the game, but gradually England and the players, the quality they've got, it pressed, it told, it was without a doubt.
When we get going, we can't be stopped. You get it? So we just got to keep the momentum going, got to keep the mood going as well, and yeah. And I feel like we'll be good as well. We'll be good to carry on the competition. So bring on whoever.
Well, with just 22,500 people allowed inside Wembley because of COVID restrictions, those not lucky enough to have a ticket followed the action across the country. Nick Garnett now reports from one Leeds pub beer garden.
12 months later than planned, but it's almost kick-off time. So keen to see a live game at their local pub, hundreds have reserved their place before the big screen in Leeds. It took just under an hour before the celebrations started.
We love it. It's been really good, and it's just nice to be out with people, enjoying the weather, enjoying the football.
It's unreal. Like, we've been isolated since March 2020, and to be back here in front of all these people, it's amazing.
It's great, isn't it? It's lovely to be back. Sun's out, England are winning. What more can you want?
What everyone's missed for like the last 18 months is, you know what, it's just having a laugh together, being safe, obviously.
For the pub industry, the actual result of the game is pretty irrelevant. Good weather and the relaxation of some COVID regulations has meant that 300 people have spent the day drinking and spending money on food.
Having atmosphere back is probably the best thing. You can't really put a price on the atmosphere. It's been, months and months since you've had anything like that. And everyone has behaved. Everyone's done what we asked them to do. And it's been brilliant just to have a little bit of something in the air again.
A confident start from the team, perhaps a little overconfident from the fans. But for England on the pitch and the country's pubs off it, there were two winners today. Nick Garnett, BBC News, Leeds.
A performance then by England to leave their fans dreaming, and a selection by manager Gareth Southgate that ended up being fully vindicated, and he will now start preparing his team for their second match of these Euros against their old rivals Scotland, of course, back here on Friday evening at Wembley. Scotland play their first match of this tournament tomorrow, meanwhile against the Czech Republic.
Dan, thank you very much. Dan Roan there at Wembley. Well, after Christian Eriksen's collapse during yesterday's Denmark-Finland Euros game, the Danish football team's doctor confirmed today that a cardiac arrest was the cause and that he was gone prior to being resuscitated. The former Tottenham star is now recovering in hospital. Nick Beek reports from Copenhagen.
The heartfelt messages were to get well soon. A show of strength for Christian Eriksen, who was awake, even asking about his teammates. Everyone here at this Euro 2020 fan zone knew it could have been so different.
Hearing that he's in good shape and he actually has some conversations with the team and so on is fantastic. And that's the only thing that matters to us, actually, Christian's health.
Yeah, the football is secondary today.
100%.
That sense of relief has been shared by football fans the world over. That's because today we got confirmation, if it were needed, of just how serious the situation was. Earlier we asked Denmark's team doctor how close they were to losing Christian Eriksen.
Yeah, what should I say? He was gone, and we did cardiac resuscitation, and it was cardiac arrest. How close were we? I don't know. We got him back.
And the sight of Christian Eriksen, conscious as he left the pitch, gave hope to all. But his teammates are being offered psychological support, and the Denmark head coach says it was wrong to ask the players to resume the match.
Players who is in a shock condition, players who almost, and they don't really know yet if they lost their best friend, and they have to decide.
Eriksen is still being monitored at Denmark's leading heart unit, where doctors are yet to work out why he collapsed. A tournament already delayed by the pandemic goes on, with football and life put in perspective. Nick Beak, BBC News, Copenhagen.
Now, it is nearly 70 years since the Queen first met a serving US president, and today she welcomed Joe Biden for tea at Windsor Castle. He travelled from the G7 summit in Cornwall, as our royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell reports.
Dropping in for tea. How very British. President Biden's helicopter brought him to a Windsor Castle geared up for a VIP visit. In the quadrangle, the Grenadier Guards were being bowled at by their Sergeant Major. Once he was happy, the Queen emerged from her castle to take her place on the dais, ready to receive the President and the First Lady. When it comes to US presidents, no one has met more of them than the Queen. President Biden is the 13th she's greeted. The Guard of Honour was inspected, and then the President and First Lady went inside for tea with the Queen. A moment of hospitality between two heads of state. Simple enough in itself, but with a particular significance, underlining the bonds between long-standing allies. Later, President Biden told US reporters that the Queen had reminded him of his mother. He said that among other things they'd talked about President Putin of Russia and President Xi of China. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News.
Now, you know about the football already, but Carthy has more sport for us now. Over to her, Carthy.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Good evening. England's cricketers lasted less than an hour against New Zealand this morning as they fell to a heavy 8-wicket defeat on day 4 of the second test at Edgbaston. New Zealand win the series 1-0, making it England's first home series defeat for 7 years. Our correspondent Jo Wilson reports from Edgbaston.
Sunday morning, how long could England's second innings resist? One ball.
All it took is a ball.
122 all out. The grim conclusion to Saturday's sorry story. OK, so England bowling again. Look out, that's Devon Conway gone. New Zealand's second innings 6 for 1. Only thing is, they only needed 38 to win. It would only take a few of these to get there well before lunch. In fact, well, they'd barely digested breakfast. England's bowlers persevered in this match. Miss-hit from Will Young and he was gone. Some light relief for Ollie Stone. But at 11:59, Tom Latham completed the formality. The winning hit from the stand-in captain.
Splendid win for New Zealand.
Remember, New Zealand rotated their players in this match and won it easily. They are a small cricketing nation. They are #1 in the world rankings. England, in part, used this series to test the depth of their own resources. Well, it all seemed rather empty.
Unfortunately, we've underperformed. I think we're a better side than the account we've given ourselves this time round. But credit to New Zealand, they've taken their opportunities, they've outcaught us, I think they've outbowled us, and they've certainly outbatted us. So it's hard to take, as it is, always when you lose, but you do have to give credit to the opposition as well.
So a trophy for New Zealand and so few overs today, the spectators got a refund. And all done long before the football. Jo Wilson, BBC News.
Tennis, and Novak Djokovic has won his second French Open title, beating the 5th seed Stefanos Tsitsipas in 5 sets in Paris. The 22-year-old Greek player, in his first Grand Slam final, took the first 2 sets. But the world #1 wrestled his way back into the match to claim the next 3 and lift the trophy. It's Djokovic's 19th Grand Slam title, just 1 short of both Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal. Well, we have heard already about England's win against Croatia this afternoon. In the Euros' other games today, Austria won a European Championship match for the very first time when they beat North Macedonia 3-1. Marko Arnautovic scored Austria's 3rd goal. Also in Group C, in the final game of the weekend, the Netherlands have beaten Ukraine 3-2. Denzel Dumfries with the winner for the Netherlands, who last won the Euros in 1988. There's more on the BBC Sport websites, including details of tennis's British #1, Johanna Konta, winning the Nottingham Open title. Michelle.
Carthy, thank you very much. That's it from us now on BBC One. It is time for the news wherever you are. Good night.